Shabbat Shalom. Good morning to everyone. Shabbat Shalom to you all. May your day be blessed, and may this time together that we share be fruitful in so many ways in your life. I am releasing, hopefully today, over you some wisdom regarding how to interact with our fellow human beings, society, how to build a kingdom of heaven-centered society on the earth in real ways, in tangible ways, in ways that change the environment around us, to bring shalom, to bring simcha, joy, rejoicing, to bring tikva, hope, a sense of expectation of good and delight, and tikkun, a sense of remediating the darkness of the world, bringing light into the dark areas of the world. So, I want to begin our discussion by telling you that this is the 48th Parsha of Torah. It is the week of Parsha Shoftim. The Hebrew word Shoftim is from the opening lines of the Parsha, which we will get to in a few moments. And it comes in the context of building this, what I call infrastructure of the kingdom of heaven coming to earth. You know, as the Messiah, our rabbi taught us to pray. He said, to pray that to the Holy One, our Father in heaven, your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in the heavens, or in heaven. And so the idea of whatever the infrastructure is in the courts of heaven, where he reigns as king and his throne is at the center of all things, but he has realms around him of people who administer his decrees and send forth his messages to the world. So it will be with us on earth, as it is in heaven, so it will be on earth. There will be layers, levels of different means of communicating his wisdom, his persona, his heart to mankind. And to our people. So in distributing his and administering his Torah, his instructions. So I call this parsha the infrastructure blueprint for the great kingdom of heaven-centered society that we are to build. Repeating that for you so you'll have it accessible in your mind. Maybe meditate on it in your mind for a moment. This is the infrastructure blueprint for the great kingdom of heaven-centered society that we are called to build. All right. We need to talk a little bit about times and seasons. Kingdom coloring notice that I like to give to you. We are indeed still, as we talked about last week, preparing to blow the shofar on Yom Teruah, known to the world mostly as Rosh Hashanah. The time of the blowing, the breathing, the return to the resuscitating, reviving, resurrection breath of the Holy One, such as we did in the garden in Genesis 2:7, as when Adam. But it's on sundown, according to the calendar that is traditional at least, sundown of Shabbat, Saturday, September 24th, as it's known in the Western world, will be this day of blowing beginning. We'll begin at sundown and go through the entire next day. During the period we're preparing for this to take place, this declaration of our return to Him, to His will and to His ways, we talk about the fact that during the month previous, the King is in the field in ways that we had not known. If you recall, Yitzhak, Isaac as he's known in the Western world, in Genesis 24, when the servant of Abraham had come back from Padan Aram with the bride that he was going to take, Rivka, Rebecca as she's known in the Western world, and came back. When they came back into the land after this long journey, when the servant had gone to retrieve this bride, the first glimpse that Rivka had of Yitzhak, her betrothed, the one she was going to marry, was when he was walking in the field, Basadi. And this idea of walking in the field, he was not just walking, he was doing something very special. He was meditating, he was engaging with the earth. And that's what when we say the king is in the field. We see him doing very specially in this particular period of time that which Yitzhak was doing. And we are, as were the Rivka in the story. And when we see him, and we realize that he is meditating in his field and he is awaiting the bride person to come, and we are it. Now, it says the story in Genesis 24 goes forward to say that whenever she saw him, she fell off her camel. It was like it was so shocking, and so she fell off her camel. And may we all be so taken in by the king in the field that we fall off our high horse or our camel, and we seek to know him who is our bridegroom king. Well, I try to give you a scripture each week. Last week I gave you from Hosea, "Come, let us return to the Holy One." Let me give you one from Isaiah 55, verse 7 this week. It is, "Let the wicked, let the Rasha, let he who is self-obsessed, forsake, slip the bands off of his way. Let the wicked, the Rasha, forsake his ways, slip the bands from his compelled protocols, and let the unrighteous man, the one who has strayed away, forsake his thoughts, and let him return to the Holy One. And he will have mercy, racham, on him, and to our God, and may he return to our God, for he will abundantly pardon." That is the message. I'll read it again without all the Hebrew suggestions to you about it, what it really means in its beginning point. "Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Holy One, and he will have mercy on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon." All right, that brings us to the whole idea of the 7 Haftarah of consolation. We're in the season of 7 weeks when we focus on the in-game plan of the Holy One and how we will be different as we prepare in the latter days for the coming of the King and the kingdom establishment and the return of all the peoples from all the earth, of the Hebrew people, the covenant people, with all those who come with them to Jerusalem, to the land. And here's part of the Haftarah for this week. I will just do it in English. "Awake, awake, put on your strength, O Zion. Put on your beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, you holy city. For the uncircumcised and the unclean will no longer come into you. Shake yourself from the dust. Arise, sit down, O Jerusalem, and loose yourself from the bonds of your neck, O captive daughter of Zion." A little bit further in the chapter is when we hear the famous words, "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings Mibasara," the good news, good tidings, "who proclaims shalom, peace, who brings glad tidings of good things, of tov, who proclaims Yeshua," in the Hebrew. Salvation, we read that in the English, but it has a personality and a persona to it. "Who proclaims Yeshua, who says to Zion, Malach Elokecha, your God reigns." That is our message for this week. The 3 overriding focuses of the season are Teshuvah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah. I know those are 3 Hebrew words, and I don't want to overload you with that. Let me kind of break that down briefly before we get into our parsha of infrastructure. The 3 overriding focuses of this season, of the king being in the field, the month of Elul, first one is Teshuvah. In English, it's usually translated, I think poorly, as repentance. Repentance tends to be an issue of the mind and how you think about things and turning away from a certain behavior pattern and a certain thought pattern. Well, those ideas are included, I presume, in Teshuvah. I know in Teshuvah. But Teshuvah actually means turning to something, not turning away from something. It means turning to someone, actually, and not just turning away from sin. Turning to the Holy One and realigning with Him and His thoughts and His ways and His will and His words. And this has to be manifested in a practical, observable change, or one or more. Change in attitude, change in lifestyle. John the Baptist, in the story of the Gospels, he said, "You bring forth fruits meet with repentance," or fruits of Teshuvah. That shows evidence that Teshuvah is having its work inside of you. So the first of our focuses is making Teshuvah. Are we walking in tune with the Holy One, or are we doing our own thing? Second main theme is Tefillah, and it's usually translated in English as prayer. Well, prayer can be all things to all people. To prayer, yeah, I don't even want to get into the details of what most people consider prayer. But tefillah, the Hebrew word that is prayer comes from, primary one at least, it means becoming one with the Holy One. By casting off, shedding self-will and self-promotion and selfish agenda. Everything that we would want. This is a matter of shedding that which is ungodly, unkingdom, incompletely tied and bound up with the Holy One. So teshuvah, making tefillah, learning a protocol of approach that causes us to pull off and pull away the things that are distracting, hindering us from being one with the Holy One. And the third one then, flowing from teshuvah and flowing from tefillah, is tzedakah. And that's usually translated as charity or sometimes justice in English, but it's neither of those really. What it is becoming and making our lives straight, plumb, level, and as per specification. And therefore, everything else around us begins to adjust. We spend our money, we spend our time, we focus our energy, our passion in ways that distribute things according to the Holy One's plan. And yes, so some it looks like charity or some it looks like justice, but what it really is us making our lives straight, plumb, level, and per specification so we'll be able to participate in the kingdom enterprise the way the Holy One designed us to do so. I'll leave those three factors. Making teshuvah, that leads to tefillah. Tefillah leads to tzedakah. And these three focuses of the season put us in tune to hear the shofar on Yom Teruah, the day of blowing, Rosh Hashanah, as it's called by many people, and prepare us then to enter into the highest of the holy days. The patterns that we will see, the practices we will have for the coming Messianic kingdom. All right, so let us then begin with our discussions of Parsha Shoftim and the infrastructure that is scented as heaven, as opposed to what the world shows you, the kingdoms of this world show you. So the call to worship, where we should begin, the Baruch. If you know it, please sing along. If not, just listen and enjoy, hopefully. Baruch Adonai Hamborak, Baruch Adonai Hamborak Leolam Vaed, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Asher Akrabanu Mikol Ha'amin, V'natan Lanu Et Torato, Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. And now may you open our eyes, O Holy One, we may see wondrous things in your Torah, for we are but strangers in this earth. So do not hide your commandments from us. The closing lines of Parsha Re'eh, which I call the Pathways Parsha, the Parsha of two pathways. Last week's Parsha, the closing lines are found in Deuteronomy 16 through 17. And it starts out with this Hebrew phrase, Shalosh Pa'amim B'Shana, 3 times a year. Shalosh Pa'amim B'Shana, 3 times a year. And then it goes forward saying, all your males shall appear, or to appear before the face, manifest presence of the Holy One your God, in the place which he chooses. This is the 3 pilgrimage festivals, or Shalosh Regalim, as they're called often in the Hebrew. So all your males 3 times a year are supposed to appear before the face, the manifest presence of the Holy One your God, in the place where he chooses. And the 3 times are at Hag HaMatzot, also called the Feast of Unleavened Bread, at Hag HaShavuot, also called the Feast of Weeks or Pentecost, and at Hag HaSukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, the one which is coming up on our calendar at the end of the High Holy Days. And it says finally, the last phrases of the last week's parsha were, and they are not to appear before the Holy One, Re'echam. They're not to appear empty, impoverished, used up, worn out. In other words, we're supposed to be refreshed. We're supposed to be ready for action when we come forward, ready for excitement, ready to get engaged with some kingdom enterprise activities when we come. And yes, it also means empty-handed, as it's said often in the English. But it doesn't just mean empty-handed. It means empty of that we should not appear empty of energy, empty of passion. All right, so that's how it ended last week. So what's next? What does Moses, our great rabbi on the plain, before we meet the great rabbi of Yeshua, what is our great rabbi on the plain going to tell us to build upon this idea of we're going to have face-to-face encounters with the creator of the universe, and he's going to design into our calendar. He already has designed into our calendar these times when we're supposed to be able to leave the rest of the world and its worries and its troubles and its usual challenges behind and focus intently on him and getting to know him and getting realigned with his will. What's the Holy One going to do? What's Moshe going to do to build upon that? Well, he starts the Parsha we know as the Kingdom Infrastructure Parsha with Deuteronomy 16, verse 18. And here it goes. I'll read some in Hebrew and translate it to you in English as best I can. Shoftim v'shotrim titan lecha. Shoftim v'shotrim titan lecha. You are to establish judges and officials, it says in English. Judges and officials, or judges and scribes, for yourselves. Bechol sha'arecha. But in all of your gates, gates is the word that's translated, used to translate in English usually. Asher Adonai noten lach ish lish barateka. That the Holy One has given you for your tribes. Vishatu et vo'am mishpat sedek. That you are to, and they are to judge the people. Judge, again, I'm going to put that in italics or something so you realize that's not the word we're really going to focus on. It's a translation word that's probably imperfect. And they are to judge the people with just judgment, is the way I think it reads in some of the English Bibles, or righteousness, as I say it in some others. And that, again, is in quotes or in italics, and you're going to find there's a lot more meaning to that than you might think in regard to what. So he tells us to establish or set judges or officials, or we're going to figure out what those mean, for ourselves in all of our gates, whatever that may be, as the Holy One gives for our tribes. And these people, these judges or officials or whatever they really are that's in our gates, are to judge, and again we'll see that's a word that needs to be defined and interpreted from the Hebrew, judge the people with just judgment, and again we'll get back to what that might mean. So he's saying, I'll build infrastructure into your lives, into your world. As you enter the land, you need to be subjected to accountability. And you need to voluntarily choose to do this for yourself. This is not for the sake of the government. This is to choose this particular infrastructure modality of the judges and officials in the gates to be your pattern to maintain in the day-to-day activities of life, to maintain your close relationship with the Holy One, and stay on pattern, on path, on task, on course, on time. Well, we might ask, why is an infrastructure so important? Why can't every man just do what he feels is right? Why can't we just follow the lead of whatever spirit we think we're following? Whether we think we're following the Holy Spirit or we're following our heart. Why can't we just do that like everybody else in the world does? What's so special? What's so important about us that we have to have infrastructure that we need to build for ourselves and for the sake of our families and our homes and our culture and our nation and all those around us? Why are we responsible for building infrastructure? Why do we need structure at all? Again, why can't every man, woman, and child just do what he thinks is right, what feels good doing? Why can't we just go Darwinian and say survival of the fittest, get over it, adjust, adapt, evolve, or perish? Why can't we be just like the rest of the nations? Oh, because we are the light to the nations. We are the Holy One's kingdom of royal ambassadors, kingdom of priests, it says in the English versions of this. We are supposed to be a nation kadosh, set apart, flowing in the energies of heaven, bringing heaven to earth in day-to-day transactions as well as everything we do. So why then, if we have to have infrastructure, if our calling upon the earth is such important that we have to have infrastructure, why these specific structures? Why are these in particular, as opposed to just setting up political theory and going, with Locke or with Jefferson's ideas or Cicero's ideas? Why don't we just study the philosophers and the political theorists of this world? Rousseau, Marx, why don't we study some of the different political theorists of all the different ages? Hobbes, somebody that would tell us how we should set up our systems of infrastructure and government. Well, because you see, those are not our sources. Those are not our God. We have the benefit of having interaction with and input from the creator of the universe. That is a precious gift that we will not surrender to Hobbes and Rousseau, or Jefferson for that matter, or any other national leader or theologian or theoretician or political theorist. We are Marx. We're not going to follow into their patterns, because we cannot and still be who we are called to be, and still do what we're called to do. So why these specific structures? What is the Holy One's objective in these particular infrastructures? And we'll talk about that. We're going to have this in the gates. We're going to have these judges and officials. We'll talk about that more, hopefully. In the palace, we're going to have a special kind of a king. That's going to be discussed in our parsha. In the tabernacle, in the place of the model portal through which we interact with the courts of heaven, we're going to have another group called the Levites and the Kohanim, the priests and the Levites there that are our guides in that process, our infrastructure in that process, personal thing. We're going to have, when we go to war, we're going to have infrastructure rules. We're going to have generals and captains, and the priest will have his role, and we'll see all these different roles. When we go have courts, when we have controversies, we're going to have different protocols we have to follow, due process protocols. Why all this stuff? What are the objectives of all these things? Why is the Holy One doing this? Why is Moshe now downloading to us these protocols for how we're going to build this kingdom of heaven society? Well, he has 8 basic objectives. I call them the big 8. And I'm going to speak them quickly. I hope maybe if you're taking notes, you'll write it down or just think it or listen carefully. But the big 8 objectives for all these protocols that the Holy One's giving us. First one is beauty and light. It goes back to Genesis chapter 1. And he let there be light, and then he saw, and everything was good. To beauty and light. The second one is fruitfulness. The next one is fruitfulness. Be fruitful and multiply. He wants us to be beacons of light, and therefore he must give us protocols to channel the light and regulate the light flow. He wants us to be fruitful, therefore he builds into our thought process, our psyche, as well as our interactions and behaviors, and even into every level of governments we may have, the principles necessary foundations for fruitfulness. Then harmonious, or you could call it synergistic interaction with orderly expansion and contraction management. In other words, he's running an ecosystem here. He wants what we do to be consistent with his ecosystem plan, harmonious with other people and things and situations, and synergistic to inspire, to encourage, to empower others as they hopefully will inspire, encourage, and empower us. But even if they just provide us friction, they will cause us to grow and mature, so everything working together for good according to his purposes. And then that's only the beauty, fruit, or light, and then fruitfulness, and then harmonious, synergistic interaction. And then 4 is shalom, peace, a sense of wholeness, wellness, well-being, of goodwill. Simcha, the next one is simcha, joy or rejoicing, the sense of gratitude and gratefulness. This is a key factor to what he wants to build in our society. The next one is tikva, often translated as hope into English. This is one of his objectives, that we would build a society that has hope, individual families and individual people who are not depressed and sad and frustrated, worried, but are hopeful of that and expecting of a good thing that the creator of the universe can bring about, even in the midst of trials, tribulations, and difficult situations, to have this inbred, inborn, burgeoning, pulsing hope, the tikva. And then the 7th of these 8 great messianic, 8 is the number of Messiah. The 7th of those is tikkun, to repair, to fix, to have an idea of redeeming and restoring everything we see that's broken or messed up in a way in which is conducive to all the other things: beauty and light, fruitfulness, harmonious synergistic interaction with orderly expansion, contraction management, shalom, simcha, tikva, and of course, tikkun. And the eighth thing, the greatest one, the one that actually represents the Messiah, is tov, good, a burgeoning, flowing sense of goodness, of nurture, of sustenance, of life, of chay, a great idea that we're going to flow and reap synergistic life by force. All right, so that's why he's going to have infrastructure. Now let's get specifically about why these structures and what these structures are. I should say, though, before I get into the social macro infrastructure that we're going to be talking about, the judges and the gates, the king on the throne, the Levites in the tabernacle, the prophet that comes forth in the information forums of the world, as opposed to using other forms, all the things on the battlefield, all the and things in the courtroom, the things of due process. Before we get into all those macro infrastructures, factors, we must understand this is going to be assuming we have already built into our lives the personal micro infrastructure. There are certain micro infrastructures that we are assumed by virtue of this place we are in the book of Deuteronomy. The things that have come before have built the personal micro infrastructure aspects into our lives. Into our lives, there are certain things that have been built, and we can't build the kingdom of synod macro infrastructure items until we have the kingdom-centered micro infrastructure items. So what am I talking about? What is big words, micro infrastructure? What am I talking about? What is kingdom-centered micro infrastructure, personal life infrastructure? The first one is Yirat Adonai in Hebrew. It means fear of the Lord in English, or is usually translated that way. The idea is not that we're terrified or petrified of the Holy One. The idea is we honor and revere him and care more about what he thinks and what he might want to do or do than we do about what the world or human beings or our own self might want to do or do in the world. So it's the idea of Yirat Adonai, fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. This is the first of the kingdom-centered micro infrastructure items. How are we doing on Yirat Adonai, fear of the Lord? Awe, or is your heart filled with awe? Is your mind filled with wonder? Are you building that sense of awe and wonder into the lives of your children, your friends, or are you caught up in boredom, and are you cynical and sarcastic? Yirat Adonai, there's this exuberance that comes with reverent fear of the Holy One. The second of the kingdom-centered micro infrastructures is the Shema lifestyle. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Now, this idea of Shema, hearing, listening, tuning into, getting in rhythm with the voice of the Holy One, and to come with that, on the basis of that, then the Shema, his covenant, treasure and cherish, and therefore carefully guard his covenant, and build and make and do his mitzvot, his mishpatim, his hukim, in other words, his commandments, his judgments, and his ordinances. Do these. This is all part of the second phase of kingdom microstructure. Kingdom-centered microstructure, which is after we get Yirat Adonai, then we begin to listen carefully and tune our voice to him and his covenant and his mitzvot, mishpatim, and hukim. The third of the kingdom-centered micro-infrastructure items beyond Yirat Adonai and Shema lifestyle is Ahavat Adonai. In English, we would translate that love of the Holy One. You are to love the Holy One, your God, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And therefore, all the things will happen and flow out of Ahavat Adonai. And it will all relate to how we relate to his ways, his words, his Torah, in other words, and his will. Ahavat Adonai. And that relates into Avodah, or the service of Adonai. And then the fourth of the kingdom-centered micro infrastructures we need to have in place before we start working about macro infrastructures outside of ourselves, personal lives, is Kedusha protocol. That's why he spent so much. Kedusha means holiness in English, but it's energy of holiness. It's what you feel, what moves you, what motivates you by being in the presence of holiness. His holiness in particular, the Holy One's holiness in particular. He said, be holy as I am holy. Let this energy flow into you and let it pulse through you the way it pulses through me, he would say. And this all starts with the Sabbath because it was the first thing he made holy. He made holy. And then it goes on and forward into all of his Kedusha protocols relating to the tabernacle and to the altar and to the different structures and the different operations of the tabernacle, the king's courts, as it were. These are holy. These are where we get Kedusha. So from Yirat Adonai, the fear of the Lord, to the Shema lifestyle, to Ahavat Adonai, loving the Holy One and therefore serving Him with all our heart, soul, and mind, then the Kedusha protocols, incorporating it into our lives, ways of touching and attaching ourselves to and receiving Kedusha energy into our lives. And fourth, teaching our children and our households after us to do righteousness and justice, as it would say in the English, but Zedek umishpat, the Torah and the Torah's ways, to teach this is part of our micro infrastructure in our own families. We must keep these words being spoken, teach them more than we teach them about math and science, and more than we teach them about entertainment, more than we teach them about even socialization. We must first teach them the ways of the Holy One as spelled out in the Torah. The sixth or the next of the items, would be Torah meditation protocols. You are to meditate on them as you speak of them as you sit in your home and as you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up. Bind them as a sign upon your hand. Let them be a symbol before your eyes. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your houses and on your gates. Now you see, these are the Torah meditation protocols that Moshe has already downloaded to us for micro infrastructure. And the seventh, or the last of those at least, is Ahavat Re'eka, the love of our neighbor, and also the love of the foreigner, and even the love of our enemy. This idea, we must have these protocols, these micro infrastructure protocols in place before we'll have effective use of the macro infrastructure items that we'll talk about. Infrastructure is so important because the Holy One's objectives require us to have both micro infrastructure focuses and macro. Now, like I said, we're going to talk about the macro being what happens in our gates. Who is in our gates, and how do we take care of issues that arise in our gates? The next thing is Melech Israel, the King of Israel. The King of our nation. How do we arrange? Who fills the throne of our world, in our world? Who makes the rules and the decrees in our world? And what are the protocols, and what are the requirements for him? And of course, he's going to have some very specific things about what he's not to do and what he is to do. We'll not discuss that right now. So we have the gates, we have the palace, and then we have the king's courts, the Levites. So we'll talk about the Levitical service and protocols in the king's courts. Then we'll talk about the forum, and there'll be discussions about how to reject the unclean revelation streams, particularly the occult and the idolaters. And then he's going to go into, instead, on the other hand, the reason for that, the reason we're so meticulous about that is because he does have a protocol for releasing wisdom from heaven, to releasing downloads and revelation. And that's through his prophet, the Navi, the prophet like unto Moshe. And we see that being discussed. He's going to talk about then how we deal with and have special cities among us, places and to go where there are just, you feel, you sense, and you experience the forgiveness, the love, and the hope of the kingdom of heaven coming to earth quickly, even as some releasing of it happening in this time, in this day. So we have the prerequisites for the cities of refuge that are made, and then in connection with those, the prerequisites before anyone can impose for the society, because no one is entitled to impose the death sentence, the death penalty for certain infractions that are so damaging to the society that they must not be allowed to continue. And then we'll have the issue of recognizing each other's boundaries. Recognize them both physically, the boundary stones where their lands are, so personal property issues, and also the boundaries they have that we just shouldn't cross. Boundaries in the emotional realm, boundaries in the intellectual realm, boundaries in the opinion, and there's certain boundaries. Learning how to recognize the sanctity of established boundaries in communities. Then elements of kingdom due process. Boy, we're going to have such amazing ways of processing before we make decisions, before we make decrees, before we come to judgments. We will go through protocols that will be unlike any the world has ever seen. And we'll allow, yes, some people to go free, and some people, but we will not form opinions until we go through the due process protocols, because of the danger of those who would be wrongly accused, wrongly judged by our minds. Then we have protocols of war, rules of engagement when we go to war, battlefield. We're not going to wage war like other people do. There are many ways, but we won't have to talk about it right now. And then finally, what to do when there's a crime scene, when there's innocent blood has been shed in particular. How do we bring healing to the land and to the atmosphere around the place when it's happened after something bad has happened? Have you ever been on a horrible crime scene? You know there's just this bad feeling that you get there, a sense of omens. And so something has to be done to change that. We see that's the last part of our protocols of macro infrastructure. Well, so we'll spend the rest of our time probably talking mostly about the first subject, which is Kingdom of Heaven scented jurisprudence in our gates. I want to shock you a little bit. Our task includes going wherever we go, and as we do, creating and maintaining a drama-free and vengeance-free zone. Wherever we go is supposed to be a drama-free and vengeance-free zone. Now, we must have the micro infrastructure protocols hard at work before we can keep our lives and our area around us, our spheres of influence, as drama-free and vengeance-free. Now, in Ephesians, Shaul said this: strive earnestly to guard and keep the harmony and oneness of the Spirit, of the Ruach, in the binding power of Shalom. Shalom is a critical litmus test. Are we at peace? And if before you go out in the world, or before you do anything that you have a chance to prepare for, at least, ask yourself this question: am I at Shalom? Am I at peace in my spirit? And if I am I willing to maintain that no matter what happens on the outside? This is the key. We have to call to create and maintain a drama-free and vengeance-free zone that is covered with shalom. That's how we're made different than the rest of the world. So let's talk first about how we do that in our gates. And what our gates are, we'll get to that in a few moments. Level 1 infrastructure protocol for macro infrastructure is what happens in our gates. Shoftim v'shotrim v'teten lak v'chol sha'arek, and you are to give or entrust judges and officers in all your gates. V'shaftu et bo'am mishpat tzedek, and they are to judge the people with just judgment, or with righteousness. So, level 1, we have to start our macro protocols and applying our micro protocols in macro places with our gates. Sha'ar in Hebrew is singular, sha'arim in plural. And what it means is actually just a place where we can cleave or divide, open a fissure, chinks in an armor, joints of a body, the weak places of vulnerability, joints in a relationship, places where we could diverge, places where we could move in different directions, like a joint. You have a joint because you're going to move in different directions. Well, there are places in our lives, in our communities, where, and these are the gates, the sha'arim, where we could go one of two ways and other people are going different ways, and we're going to interact with people that are not doing exactly the same thing we're doing, thinking the same way we're thinking, behaving the same way, with the same priorities and values. The first usage is found in Genesis 19:1. It's discussed what Lot was doing in the first usage of Shar, where Lot was whenever he was encountered by the angels that came to Sodom. He was in the Sha'arim of Sodom. He was there where the interactions were taking place of people who were not on the same page. So let's go on. What is a Sha'ar? It means, like I say, to have a place of ingress, egress, vulnerability. Even though the Holy One has created our bodies to have strength and ligaments and around our joints, that's our place of vulnerability, and that's what will fail. most likely, and someone can use that to hurt us. They can pull our arm behind our back, push, do whatever they need to do to hurt us there. We're most vulnerable where we have this brokenness interaction place, our joints. And so it is with humanity. When we get to a certain location and some people are going one way, some another. Some have certain agendas, some have others. Some have certain ideas, some appetites, some desires that others don't have. When we're at a joint place where we could go different directions, we have different likes and dislikes, that is when we have a sha'ar. That is a place of potential vulnerability, when we are in potential conflict. So, where do we run into situations like that? What physically in our world that we deal with? First is the actual gate of our property, where people enter and exit. They are not coming in perhaps with the same mindset we have, and so every interaction at the gate. Then within the gates is the door of our home, and the chairs or the seats of our parlor or our table. Everywhere we are, where different people interact. It could be our own family members interacting. We have sha'arim, we have gates that we must have some kind of protocol in advance, expectations to know what we're going to do if we get in controversy with someone else. Then, of course, on our streets and our roadways, traffic, parking lots. Then there's the workplace. In the context of agricultural society, that would be the field, the garden, the vineyard, the orchard, the forest. But in our world, it's office buildings and factories and on the line internet, wherever the workplace may be. That's a place of potential vulnerability. We're going to interact with human beings that are not on the same page as us. And then, of course, in the public square or forum where people express ideas or opinions about political, ideological, religious, theoretical, scientific, medical positions, we're going to have differences of opinion there. So in our game, what are we supposed to do then at this level of interaction, at this lowest level of interaction, one-on-one or one-on-two or one-on small groups? When we have these interactions and there's obviously a conflict or a difference of position, of approach, or opinion on something, how do we handle this? Are we prepared? Or do we just say, well, we're right and they're wrong? And that's not going to be a very helpful protocol. So we think about what could possibly go wrong in our gates, in these places of interaction. Well, Yeshua, our Messiah, our Rabbi taught us, woe, oi in Hebrew, oi to the world because of what in English we see as offenses. Scandalon in Greek, or mokesh in Hebrew. Woe, alas, oi to the world because of offenses, for offenses will come. But woe, alas, oi to the man through whom the offense, the scandalon, the mokesh comes. So what is an offense, or what is a scandalon, or what is a makesh? Well, the Hebrew yakash, from which we get makesh whenever we keep putting it in motion, is that it is a snare left for prey. There are things that we do, that we can do, that other people will do in interactions that lay a snare, that trigger something, that put a potential danger zone. And usually it's to trespass, to tempt, to incite, or to insult. These are the four main ways of offense. Trespass, in other words, we infringe someone else's real or perceived right or self-interest. We infringe someone else's real or perceived right or self-interest. The second, beyond trespass, is temptation. Offense comes through temptation. That which excites a fleshly urge, appetite, desire, or a pseudo-intellectual opinion or hard way of thinking about things, and causes some conflict to arise, or some envy or appetite to arise. Then the third is incitement, and that which stirs up outrage or envy or bias, or rushes to judgment, negativity in that regard. And the fourth is insult. Fourth level of offense is insult, and that is a perceived attack on a person's dignity, or their worth, or their value, or their character, or their family history and therefore their value to the world. So we know that this could happen, and it does happen. You've seen it. It will happen in every culture, including ours. There will be conflicts arising out of these offenses, these snares, these triggers of behavior. So if we know that in advance, we can prepare ourselves to go into the world with infrastructure, with a plan, as opposed to just being offended by everything because we weren't ready for that. We weren't expecting that. We didn't think that could possibly happen. It's not right that it happened. It's not fair that it happened. And so, yes, it is. I mean, that's life. That's what life is. Every time we engage with a human being, we have potential for a conflict. You should know that in advance, therefore behave and react accordingly and appropriately according to your calling as a representative of the kingdom of heaven. Because people will have different attitudes and different perspectives. They will have different agendas, different priorities, different commitments, different timetables. They will have different levels of maturity. They will have different sowing and reaping cycles. They'll be at different places in a sowing and reaping cycle. What they sow, they will reap. So whatever they've sowed, they'll be reaping at some stage. Understand that about people that you're going to deal with. You don't just judge them on the basis of what you see. They have different triggers for their different areas of brokenness that flow from the ingestion of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Each human being has these problems, and when we deal with human beings, we should not expect perfection from anybody. We should not expect that they're going to automatically be in tune with us and focused on the things we're focused on and prioritizing the things we're prioritizing, or our level of maturity, or our level of understanding, or untriggerable. Just look around you before you get up into society, before you deal with gates, interactions. Consider who will be affected by what you say and by what you do, or even by your tone as you do it. Be careful, be thoughtful about this process. This is unlike the rest of the world, which just does what they want to do and expects people to get along, get over it. We are called to choose our words and our actions and our demeanor and our tone carefully to produce the most shalom, the most fruitfulness, the most harmonious interaction possible. As much as it lies within your ability, be at shalom with all men, Shaul would say. So this is a big challenge of infrastructure. The best practice counsel you can receive is Yeshua's counsel. Whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. For this is the essence of the Torah and the prophets. Whatever you want men to do to you, do also. So you need to know what you want men to do to you, or how do you want them to behave towards you, men, women, children. Whatever the age of the person is, and whatever the situation of the person, what do you wish for them to do in relation to you? Do you know that before you enter in? Because if you don't, you won't be gearing your thoughts, your speech, your actions, your demeanor, and your tone to bringing forth that, or at least facilitating that from the people. You'll just do whatever you want and expect them to do what you want without even giving them a chance to do it. So now let's get to the what we do in the gates, at these places of interaction, at these places where we might have conflict, or the joints. He says, I want you to set up and have a Beit Din infrastructure modality. Beit Din means house of judgment in English translation. Beit Din is a traditional way of having three people, three wise or more, but usually it's three. Three wise, devout, impartial, mature Torah scholars who have a reputation for honest, level-headed decision-making, to be someone you will consult, to be on your contact list, on your speed dial, so to speak. So this is who you will go to if you begin to feel you're having a conflict with somebody. Before it gets to the stage of argument, before it gets to the stage of negativity, of violence, particular, of accusation, of threat, three devout, wise, impartial, mature Torah scholars that have a reputation for honest and level-headed decision-making. Do you have that? Do you have your speed dial with your three Beit Din participants? And this is a challenge. If you don't have that, then you will just act on your own with your own ideas. But the idea is we have three. Why three? Three is because if there is a difference of opinion, you won't have one versus one, which is if you had two two in the Beit Din, you have maybe two conflicting opinions and 50-50 rule. Who decides? You have to be the decision maker. You have to be the swing vote. And you were probably having a bone in the fight, a dog in the fight, so to speak. And so it's better not to have those two where they could be a one half, one position versus the other position. It needs to have three, because with three you have a deciding vote that is not you. Now the problem with having these Beit Din infrastructure modality people that you trust and you know who you'll go to about an issue, and you'll know how you're going to present yourself to that person. The trouble with that is you're going to have to be willing to abide by what they say. Most of American, or most cultures in general, most people do not want to do this. They want to have the right. That's for if the Shoftim, if the Beit Din does not rule what you want, they want to appeal. They want to fight. They want to argue. So that the reason you choose these three is because you believe they have some wisdom, and you believe they have some Torah understanding, and they have a reputation for honest and level-headed decision making in the past. So if you chose them as being your people, you need to trust them. And even if it conflicts with what your thoughts or your emotions are at the time, you need to trust them. This is kingdom of heaven, scented, macro infrastructure at its basic lowest level. So what are these judges? Who are they? As we've said, they're wise, devout, impartial, mature Torah scholars that have a reputation for honest and level-headed decision making. They're here. What are they for? What's their purpose? To set things in proper order, to keep things going in shalom, in fruitfulness, in harmonious interaction, to make forward-looking, redemption-bringing decisions, not knee-jerk reactions, not who's right and who's wrong in a given situation, not what punishment is appropriate. But the real issue is, how are we going to fix this problem? Bring tov to bear. This is what a shofet, a judge, one of these Beit Din members is designed to do. Not to take a side and not to enforce one side's rights versus another, but to bring the shalom of God and the wisdom of God to bear on active disputes, cases, and controversies. The first usage is found in Genesis 16:5, and it is Sarah, after the issue has come up about Ishmael, what to do with Ishmael, saying that may the Holy One be our shofet. May he shafat between us. It's not because she wants to get her side right. He wants to have the Holy One tell him what to do, and he did. He told him what to do in that process, and Ishmael was let go. Now, the issue of understanding who these people are and what they're supposed to do, and why our opinion is never going to be what matters, what our sense of right and wrong is never going to be what's mattered. If we have chosen, according to the Holy One's instruction, to have three people on speed dial, as it were, that we can go to before controversies get to the drama stage. As remember, we're supposed to be a drama-free society with a drama-free era and spheres of influence around us. If we have these three people on speed dial, then we have to learn to trust what they have to say. They might have insight and input that we don't. I know it's hard for us to accept. We think we're always right. We wouldn't have an opinion if it wasn't right. Well, how's that working out for you so far? And so there's not just the judges, though, not just the Shoftim. There's also, we're supposed to set in place, have scribes, Shotrim. It means to write or to inscribe or to record. You could call this like someone who keeps up with and who writes it down, not just who the judges speak it, but it's written down where we can consult it and apply it. This puts it into a written form that becomes solid and permanent in our midst. And have our disputes or our issues recorded, and then have the responsibilities we're given recorded as well. Well, these are the first usage of this was the taskmasters of Egypt. They were assigned by Pharaoh to record what was supposed to be done and what was done, and to oversee the task and how well it was done. So these are the things we do. Now the final issue I'll really talk about this morning is what's English translated as righteousness or just judgment. Mishpat Zedek in Hebrew. And they are to judge them with Mishpat Zedek, with just judgment, it says in English. Now, the word tzedek is the key factor here, and it's usually translated righteousness or charity, tzedakah, charity. These different English terms mean virtually very little because the Hebrew is so much broader. Basically, it's a term, tzedek, and all the forms of tzedek, tzedakah and the others, tzaddik, the person who is tzedek. It comes from the construction trade and the idea of building something. And so if you have materials and supplies, you need to make sure they are certain things, that they are according to the specification that will, because the architect, the designer of this project knows what will and won't bear what levels of weight, what weight bearing needs there are in the structure. And so the materials must have that weight bearing ability. In addition, they must be straight, they must be level, they must be plumb, or else the structure will eventually collapse. And so the idea of tzedek means that which will cause the structure to be able to bear up under the weight of difficulties and challenges that life faces, and which will be able to, can be built upon, can lay a foundation for further building. So straight, true, level, plumb, in order to both to make it the structure work, make the kingdom work. So everything is not based upon personal right and wrong and personal opinions and personal needs. It's based instead, just judgment is based upon what is good for the sake of building the kingdom. What should be done, what decision needs to be made, forward-looking to build the kingdom long range. All kingdom of heaven-centered jurisprudence and decision-making is supposed to be done with the future, not just the past or the present, not just who's right or wrong in mind. I know that's a shock to most Western thinkers or most thinkers in general. We have the ability to jump to conclusions based upon what we've seen in the past, what we saw people do, or what we see them doing, and therefore we must decide, okay, then this is the necessary movement. It is not. The key issue is what needs to happen in the future, considering all factors, what needs to be done to build the kingdom of heaven in the future. And bloodlines, because you see, not just the people involved that we see doing things or engaged in a controversy or conflict are there, it's their families, and it's those people that their lives impact and affect. Generations may be involved. By virtue of this, we have to keep those things in consideration. That's why kingdom of heaven-centered jurisprudence and decision-making. Before we rush to any opinion or judgment, we need to have these issues of past, present, and future, mostly future, of how this needs to work in mind. Conflict resolution and community building are important. Healing the community is very important. Bringing forth peace as much as possible, shalom, and tikkun, and restoration. And avoiding things like blame casting. The blame is not the issue. The resolution is the issue. Avoiding personal agenda advancement. We're not trying to promote one agenda over another or one person's rights over another. We're trying to build the community together. And we're not supposed to be focusing on retribution or vengeance. Those things are the anathema of a kingdom of heaven-centered society. Those things are proof we are not connected to our king. Well, because we're not supposed to be doing vengeance at all. Well, the goals are to bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. Kingdom jurisprudence and decision-making is about what will fix the bad situation, the conflict, or the challenge, the disagreement in the long term, over the long term. What will lay a foundation that will allow healing and rebuilding to take place? What will not make things worse with the human emotion ideas of vengeance and payback and pride and arrogance and punishment and people getting their just deserts? So, level 1 infrastructure is what we do in the gates, and what he basically says is you shall not pervert justice. You shall not twist it. You will not turn it. Things you should not use bribes. There should not be the giving of a benefit. There should not be an interest, a self-interest in the decision-making process of any variety. Because a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise man, Moshe says, and twists, resets the words of the righteous, changes the meaning of words and the inflection of words to the point that it becomes more painful and harmful than it is healing. If your judges, if your ways of making decisions, if your expressions of opinions are bringing forth more pain and harm than they are bringing forth life and restoration and healing, there is a real problem with your gates infrastructure. And you are seeing justice perverted. You are seeing that which is necessary to build the kingdom pulled out. You've inserted into the specification sheet of our kingdom building enterprise a bunch of faulty materials. All right. So he's going to culminate this passage of our gates infrastructure protocols with Zedek Tirduf. You are to follow, you are to pursue that which is according to spec, that which is true, that which is building and foundational for building of the future. La'ma'an tikyeh ve'yarashit et ha'aretz, that you may live in and inherit and pass a heritage into the land. Asher Adonai Eloheka noten lak, which the Holy One, your God, is giving you. Well, that's all we really have time for this morning, beloved. I want to thank you for listening. If you've been listening from another location, even from Texarkana, just let me know and drop a line. Tell me where you are. If you have a prayer request, if you have a comment, if you have anything you'd like to ask or say, please do that and drop it in your comment section here, or you may be watching on YouTube later, whatever it is. Thank you so much for letting me come into your home, into your social media, or into your computer and or your smartphone. It's a pleasure, it's an honor to share this Sabbath message with you. Zedek Tirduf. You are to follow and pursue that which is Zedek, that which is true, that which is level, that which is straight, that which is plumb, that which brings about tikkun and healing, that which brings about shalom and hope and life in the world. Shabbat shalom. See you next week.